How you guys doing?
Doing okay. What's going on? Here's the birthday boy here, or yesterday was the birthday.
That's right.
Yes, yes. I am 1 year younger.
Uh, Now this is what it was like because I'm sitting here all concerned. I was man, I got to check in and make sure Greg's having a good birthday. Coronavirus going on. I call him up and there's a party going on. Hey, listen, Rick, I'd love to talk with you, man, but.
And were you invited?
No, of course not.
No. I didn't want.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and get into this here, gentlemen.
Please do.
Welcome to this is Zoom Breakdown with all three of us here. Jack is back. I didn't get a chance to do it last time, but I wanted to make it official. Jack is back. Maybe I'll get some titles on there so that. Gregory J. Bradley and myself, Rick Almada. We're doing a breakdown of Fargo, continuing on our Fargo escapades. Fargo, Season 4, Episode 1, Welcome to the Alternate Economy, written by showrunner Noah Hawley. Lee Edward Colston, a staff writer, the second staff writer, is also credited on this. I looked it up. And of course, this is available at Amazon, FX, and Hulu. I've gotten into this. I haven't know anything Fargo now. I automatically go, okay, what existential philosophy is this connected to? What probability theory or mathematical logic is this? And I really didn't find anything, but I did find something, and I can use this for reference. There's a document called Anti-Consumerism and the Alternate Economy. I'll put in a link in there for people who are interested in looking at it. But I picked up 3 things out of it that I think connect to our episode. One of them, it says, many people are finding that the economy no longer works for them. In the opening narration, Ethelreda Pearl Smutney, played by Emery Crutchfield, her first words in her narration, intoning Frederick Douglass, I stand before you a thief and a robber. And as she goes on, the crux of it, the finishing touches, the irony is, which is his emancipation and freedom from his slave owner. She goes on, Ethelreda is being sent to her principal's office or dean's office, disciplinary or spanking. Her response when asked what she did this time is, I've been maligned. Interesting that after the dean is done spanking his students, he extends his hand to shake hands, like he's doing them a favor. The moment, and then she goes on, there's these words are in her narration, the moment our feet touch soil, we were already criminals. As she begins, we start moving into this opening sequence where she's narrating and at the same giving we start with his history of this town. And then from the alternate economy document, even after obtaining an education, gathering skills and training, hard work and paying their dues, achieving success or merely comfortable survival has become very difficult. It's clear that this is the norm for her. She's actually academically ahead of her class. It looks to me like it. As she would later say, the problem was the only thing worse than a disreputable Negro was an upstanding one. And then she makes the point to say, this is not her history we are hearing, it is our history. And then we get the history, centered around this establishment, Joplin, right? Where the underworld meets. 1900 to story present of 1950. The Hebrews, the Moscovite Syndicate, the Irish Milligan Concern, the Fada Italians, and then Lloyd Cannon, Chris Rock, the Blacks. The immigrants' quest for better or alternate economy. Finally, from the alternate economy, people sometimes react to the inability to meet their expectations through expressions of anger, depression, or substance abuse. Others turn to crime and parasitize people through overt stealing or theft by another name, such as multi-level marketing or the sale of questionable value in merchandise or service. She quotes some interesting quotes that she does. quotes Winston Churchill, the winners write are the ones who write history. History is written by the winners. And then a famous thing where she says, peace, but peace don't last for long. And then we go through these ironic and weird, kind of cruel practice of the gangs giving their young, the youngest one to be raised by the other one. Moskovitz and the Irish come together and do this exchange. But it's an exchange. The concept, interesting, is to make peace, but it seems to backfire almost immediately because the Irish kid thwarts them and then sets them up to be killed. And the father, with the famous that little Goldilocks speech he gives to his son, to shoot the young Moskovitz boy. So getting the paddle is normal for her. As we cut back to her, I think of the words Colonel Wilkerson said, that often when you do the right thing, you're not rewarded, you're often vilified. And she begins to talk about assimilation, assimilate, to become similar to, right? And similar to what? And then a great quote that she has, if America is a nation of immigrants, then when does one become an American? It's better, as in the story we begin to see, it's better to pit immigrant against immigrant. That seems to be the case that goes on. The Irish boy has been given away twice by his father, double crosses him in the same way his younger self double crossed the Moskovitz. It was clear that the shooting of the young Moskowitz boy had a detrimental effect on him, and it is his father he shoots this time. The fathers meet the Loy Cannon gang, the blacks. Loy dispels with the spitting of the hands for shaking, which has been the tradition, and brings out a switchblade, offering why don't we do this like men? And the fada insulting in Italian, laughing and insulting that this boy thinks he's a man. However, he cuts his hand as well. And so this is kind of like seems to be a new tradition. They shake hands. All right then, right? This beginning of change and attitude, because neither of the young boys really wants to do this fucking thing. The boy expressing to the, I think it's Brule Cannon is his actual name, the boy, and just to his father one-on-one is really adamant, saying no, no, no. And then the young fada boy, saying it out there in front of everybody, just saying, I really don't want to go. And then Rabbi Milligan, I love that they showed the Rabbi Milligan and the other Fasto as the boys who were switched before, and brings the young Cannon boy over to to Loy Cannon, and then takes the Fada boy, the young Cannon boy over to the Fada family, and then sets up the words as he's getting to making the words that her last words are in that narration. Last words are acts. I paraphrase, but sometimes we're making history without realizing that the acts that we're doing are making it, without realizing the acts that we're doing are making history. As she walks into this meeting with Loy Cannon and associates, and that beautiful, she's dismissed, the backing out. She's backing out. She's actually, they show her walking backwards out of that room, and then the camera from Loy Cannon on backing out and close 23:14 into before we get Fargo and all these titles begin.
We got a new record. He broke his old record from season 3.
A lot to talk about. One last thing as we talk about this episode, I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say about Justo Fada, Jason Schwartzman with Orietta Mayflower, the snorting scene, Don Fado's downfall, and the alternate economy is proposed by Loy Cannon and Dr. Senator scene. I call it a credit card. And of course, no response because of our customers aren't the kind of people who would spend money they don't have. So with that, gentlemen, we begin anywhere you want, and I'm look forward to hearing your wisdom on this first episode.
Hey, don't put that kind of pressure on me. I'm going to leave wisdom to Jack, okay?
Oh, yeah, you won't find it here.
Well, you're just going to talk. You're just going to talk out your ass.
No, all these characters I just love. You know, I love Orietta.
Yeah,
it's just insane. You know, even and Andrew Bird is in this. Andrew Bird is a musician. He wasn't known as an actor. He's the father in the funeral home.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I love Glenn Turman, who plays Dr. Senator.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Such like gravitas, or
Mhm.
He's so substantial.
Yeah.
You know, it's fun to watch him perform. Yeah. Wait, I thought everybody was really well cast.
I was taken back on the scene where she says, I think it was the last moments of the opening, where she had, after the boys exchange with each other from the blacks to the Italian, and she made a comment that everybody in the room wasn't white.
Yes.
And so basically that's the story you're going to follow. And the theme is about immigrants and trying to battle for the scraps, you know, of people that were richer, white people, you know. And I thought it was interesting. There was a couple of things that stuck for me. One was when, obviously, you mentioned the reference that the father, you know, head gangster said after meeting Chris Rock, when he pulls out the switchblade and says, "We can do this like men, cut themselves, shake hands." And he turns and he says, you know, this boy thinks he's a man. But then when he turns right back around, Chris Rock's character got right in his face.
Yeah.
So right at that moment, it was showing dominance in a way that the guy still went through with it. So you were already kind of seeing it was this essence of one family portrays another family, immigrants. The Irish portrayed the
Hebrews.
The Hebrews, and then the Italians portrayed the Irish, but they were all on the guise of peace. So I thought that history lesson was fascinating. But then two other things that also stuck with me was when, again, Chris Rock and the head of the Italian family were sitting on the bench, and they were talking about maybe seeing each other's sons for like a weekend. And Chris Rock's made the comment that, "You think that I work for you." And he says that because he's saying, you're not that much better than I am, because you're looking down on, they look down on you just as much as they look down on us. And you have two scenes that this episode shows you that set it up perfectly. One is the scene where Chris Rock's character and his partner, I love the name, Dr. Senator, are there to pitch the credit card to a white banker. And there's always this, and we see this a lot of times in period piece, particularly when it's dealing with African Americans, that you're less than, you know, from the banker. I mean, and the fact that he comes out with a $1 billion idea, but because of his color, he will never be taken seriously in the mainstream world. But on the flip side is when the father, when he gets shot, the head of the family gets shot, and they rush him to the hospital, and they wouldn't accept him, you know, because he was Italian. Was probably one of the first times that I've seen how Italian American was also treated. And that really floored me. And I really loved the bookends of how these immigrants, so to speak, are kind of, they have more in common than they do, you know, separately.
I think back about that commonality thing, because that comes through anytime you talk about like unions coming together and stuff like that. It's always there's always like there's much more in common between where, you know, that's one of the discussions I think that usually winds up happening, is that, you know, there's a lot much more aligned here and we should be fighting this thing together. That that takes place because there's that separation that is, I think, illustrated in here. That elite, there's an elite, and then there's everybody else. Like you will never, you will get here and you'll get here, but you'll never get here. And the idea of kind of like that fighting amongst each other is actually, quite honestly, seems to be preferred. I thought you were spot on about that when he went in to get treated, and that thing when the guy goes, he says, we don't take your kind of people, and that exact thing, and you can go to the blah blah hospital. That's good for your. He kept like he laid it in quite a little thick there.
That guy's named Steve Spencer. He's a Chicago actor. That was fun.
It's really known, the Black experience in America. We know it. And sometimes it's still so much we don't know, but we know how we were treated, particularly in that particular time. But it's also interesting that the show took the time to show how other immigrants are treated, and that's something I don't see that often. And so when I saw the Italians being treated like that, to the point they had to actually go to another hospital, there was a part of me that was like, wow, just like Black people. That's exactly how that would have went in the 50s. So I thought that was fascinating to actually show another ethnic group that's not either Black or Hispanic. The Italian Americans kind of look down on similar ways as well.
Yeah, when the Italians first came, and that the first time we see them, that Don Fado his jacket, he's dressed like someone who's like just he's not all that, there's kind of like a torn up leather jacket, whatever. And then when he's meeting the blacks, like Cannon, he's made some sort of inroad, right? Because he's clearly, they kind of got like nice.
Well, I think that's
nicer dress.
Yeah, I think that's where the assimilation comes in, because you're looking at the turn of the century, and it's the Hebrews that are coming in. But when any minority group that shows up, we're showing up with the clothes on their backs. So they meet, with the Irish the same way. But if you went over the gang war, then all of a sudden you find that you prospered a little in America. You dress better. So therefore, every time, like you say, you see them again, they're dressed a lot better. They're more fitting in. They're more, assimilated, so to speak. Which is interesting too, because when you see the Cannon on Chris Rock's clan show up, and it's all tribal. That's another thing. They really show kind of the tribalism of sticking with your tribe. But when his boy shows up, they're already dressed to the nines. They're already, because, they were already here to begin with, so they were the only immigrants that didn't choose to come to America. They were already forced to be here. Right. So I loved how he set up this kind of 20-minute narrative backstory that was so fascinating, and told through the perspective of this young Black 16-year-old, as kind of a history, like she was reading from history. And I just thought that just the setup of itself was so fascinating.
Yeah. Well, isn't she sort of like, it's a report, like she's giving a report at school. And so that was fascinating. And it's true that the Blacks were the only one of those communities that were sort of native. At that point, they were part of the community, whereas the others were interlopers.
Yeah.
And still they can get treated,
Well, it's history has shown us that out of all the ethnic groups, the Black groups were treated the worst. It was the skin color. That's why racism has never disappeared. It was always there. Even when they freed the slaves, they had to find a way to make sure that even if they got jobs, they were never going to be on equal terms with their white counterpart and stuff like that. So it is fascinating. And so when you look at the ethnic groups, you could see sometimes how they can fall into crime. you can see how that the groups had to do certain things to survive, because you weren't, the Statue of Liberty was like, give us your, your masses, the poor and stuff. But that was just a thing. It was never treated that way, because if you came in as an immigrant, you were always treated, you always knew who you were by your race and the way that the whites were going to treat immigrants and stuff like that. The blacks just had it the worst because of the color of their skin.
Of course.
And having her, using her, what's her character's name? She did a really excellent job.
Ethelreda, that's the name.
Right. So Ethel, I mean, for her to, because she's going through the abuse as we're seeing. So the fact that using her to talk about the history of the immigrants and the minorities, I thought was just excellent. And that's something Fargo has done time and time again, and it didn't disappoint, which is they give you these prologues that are like short stories, and before they get into the show. Now, I want to ask you guys something. Does this feel more in line of Fargo, or did this feel that part one episode feel less Fargo? Meaning in the way that they, we've seen the way that they set up their characters in the past.
Right.
I don't know. To me, I feel like it's part of the continuum. I don't know that I felt a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
I feel, let me put this, I feel it's the same in the sense that, that idea that Fargo is a state of mind.
Yeah.
I'm right. Definitely it's to me, it's the same.
Well, I mean, this one was done in Kansas City too. This was
done in Kansas City.
Literally.
So at least at this point, no police, no really centered around any police. You know what I'm saying? There's no police, like there's no Molly or Gloria at this point coming in here. That's kind of like, so far, that's the only thing to me that's kind of different.
Well, the only policeman that goes all the way through is the one that's a turncoat. Yeah.
Well, I don't tell him that.
Okay.
Tell Greg.
This is my first episode, so
yeah. Okay.
But that's
spoiler alert.
But I would, however, say that it appears to be, quite honestly, I could sit there and say that since Ethelreda, in other words, she's got to play a prominent place in this. She could kind of take that position of, quote unquote, if we go good versus evil, as good in this, because she's telling the story. And something happened, right? We see her, she came into that meeting where she walked in, her parents are sitting there with Lloyd Cannon.
Which is interesting too, because they're interracial as well.
Yes. Yeah, I wanted to, you guys mentioned this here on the immigrant thing, the immigration and the black experience as opposed to the other immigrants, because I thought this kind of touched on it. I was going to ask about what you thought, like in other words, Moskowitz 1900, then some Irish 1920, 1934, something like that, the Fadas, blah blah blah, and then 1949 the blacks. I think this feeds into what you're saying, but it was I think it was World War II. I don't think in World War I, they didn't let the blacks, they didn't have blacks in the military for World War I. Am I wrong or am I right on that? Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But in 1945, and for World War II, they called on blacks, they had blacks enlisted in the military. And to me, it was a thing of like, people shed their blood, you know what I'm saying? They went out and shed their blood overseas and blah, blah, blah. They got it. There has to be some sort of like, because out of all that eventually came the whole civil rights movement. And, the 50s were, I believe, a kind of like a rather tumultuous time, even though we look at 50s are sold as, a time of like prosperity and wonderfulness. But there was like a lot of civil unrest in the sense that blacks were really starting to saying, look, this, the civil rights was really, really kind of like, I think got their footing, quite honestly, in the 50s, were really coming around. And then there's the 60s where Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all those really kind of just stepped up and said,
well, I think the war really sped things up. Look,
Right.
Civil rights, I think, would eventually have come, but I think,
Right.
like you said, if we were in the war in the 1940s, then we definitely were in the war in the Korean and particularly the Vietnam War. And
Right.
when those things were happening, to the point that, I mean, it's documented that even the Viet Congs would try to use propaganda to black men to say, why are you fighting? You shouldn't be fighting us because your own race, your own country treats you wrong. And the thing about their propaganda is there was a lot of truth in that. So
It was true.
obviously, yeah, there was true.
Yeah.
So, and
Muhammad Ali said it out loud, like said, why,
yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, why would I go out and kill them when they've done nothing to me, but my own country will constantly keep me down? And I think when the men came back from war, and obviously they were always still treated different. They were still segregated. There was still a lot of racism that was going on. And so, no, I totally agree. I think that, it's again, this particular pilot and this particular episode really is kind of getting into what I think is fascinating of two groups that despise each other, but they are so similar in a lot of ways. Yeah. But no matter what, the blacks will always, even the Italians will always have a step up because of the color of their skin, the color of their skin.
Yeah, I mean, the American racism is bizarre just because, right. At the turn of the century before that, of course, the Irish were, one of the groups that weren't a lot, like they're blue eyes, they're white skin, they're pale, like they were still discriminated against because of the way they spoke. It's just, American racism is bizarre.
I wonder how much of that came from England, because it was obvious that England, that the Irish was the black of Europe, and I wonder when they came over to America, they still brought that type of prejudice with them. And so therefore, the idea that the Irish was probably lesser than maybe even the Italians, but they all look the same, or the Jewish, but probably the one thing that everybody could say is, well, at least we're not the blacks. So, but they still, it is still a story about assimilating and trying to be American. But I think the girl's narration really hits it, where when do we become American? When does that happen?
I think that's a question that even goes on beyond, beyond. It's like, I think anybody could really wind up, I'm second generation or third generation, or, there's prejudices, and there's things that you grow up with that you just don't think of, when you're growing up with them.
Right.
That
is normal.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, and that holds a person back as much as anything, because you get into a frame of thinking of how something should be, right? So that was great. We were having a really good talk about immigration America, and what each ethnicity has gone through, and of course, you talk about basically, the black experience had to go back to, because they were already here, quite honestly, when all these other people started coming across, and Jack used the word interlopers. That's correct. Everybody was were coming here looking for that America, the promise. Whereas, the power and where you belong, was where a person belongs, which is expressed beautifully in this, very well, again, in this story. They do a good job of really, showing, how people view, you know, you who are not amongst this group of
Right.
the elite, quote unquote, the elite, right?
Well, the episode itself is kind of a twofold, because that first 22 minutes, 24 minutes is all about setup. It's all about, and history. So it really takes its time setting up the characters and who they are and what is it they want and the history behind all that stuff. And then the other almost 35 minutes or so is kind of where the plot begins.
Right.
You know, because then from that point on, we are introduced to, outside of the leads that we've talked about in the first half, the second half, I think we're introduced to a very nutty nurse that's almost very borderline on the Fargo type of character, you know, because when she meets when she meets our 16-year-old at her father's funeral home, you could see the type of racist comments that she says, but it flows from her so naturally that it's like that was the speak of the time, you know, and she was probably considering herself being nice to the young African-American girl.
But she's talking to her. She's
talking to her and everything like that. I mean, it even sets it up so nicely, because you're first amazed that her father was white to begin with, that runs the funeral home, and she in her narration says that her father runs the white, you know, when it's a death of a white person, the father runs that. If it's of a colored person, then her mom would run it. And so right at that beginning, when she says, "Do you want me?" It looks like the service of a white family has just ended, and she says, "Do you want me to enter in the back?" And he's like, "You can go on in the front." You know, it looks like it's mostly cleared out. And but I gotta say, what is the do you know the character's name? I think it's Mayflower, the nurse.
Henrietta Mayflower.
Yeah. Wow, she is something else. We'll talk more about her, but I thought it was interesting, that exchange that they both had.
Yeah, and I thought also it was interesting. I mean, although they uncover the father having to tell his daughter, go to the kitchen, you know, because she was like saying, you know, she was like, by this time she's kind of the norm. Should I go around? I think, what'd she say? Should I go around the back? She says, go through the kitchen. Imagine, you know, I guess the feeling the guy had to be going through in terms of like, how do you tell your daughter? You know, the oddness of that, having to be acclimated to that existence is kind of weird.
Well, also too, wasn't interracial dating was against the law back then? I mean, what year was it where
1950 maybe?
Yeah, so that was, and it takes place at 1950. So that means that either that law was still a law, or it just stopped becoming against the law to date. And interracial marriage, more or less.
And at this point, she's 16 years old.
Yes, exactly. And that's interesting. I thought it was interesting that the father just told her that, yes, she is my daughter, in the sense that sometimes it's easier to just not mention it, you know, because again, they're putting on the idea that, you said something, Jack, that's so true. The woman talked to her. She talked to the daughter. But at that time, they probably didn't say anything to them. They discard them, they ignore them, or they treat them like they probably are the help or anything. So you can imagine if somebody was really racist, found out that this white mortician was married to a black woman and they had a black kid. But I thought the dialogue that the nurse said, I thought was fascinating, when she said the dominant gene sometimes comes out. And it was the most cringeworthy type of racism. To me, that's almost worse than if the person was just straight up racist.
Because it's so oblivious.
Yes.
So oblivious. Well, so in the last few weeks, for 3 weeks, I worked as a poll judge, an election judge. And one of the other workers was an African-American man, probably my age. And you know, one of the things that we talked about was like when he was, you know, his kids would go into a pool, a public pool, you would slowly see the white kids start to get out.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's the sort of racism that's so pervasive, and yet if you're not paying attention, it's really easy to miss. You know.
Oh yeah.
Unless you're
black.
If you're,
I mean,
exactly.
If you're black, you don't miss it, but if you're white, it's something. And that was the society, that was the world that they lived in.
It's not long ago, and it's just so hurtful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, again, how watching these episodes seem to mirror our society, to recognize that the racism and all that stuff is still with us, and it seemed like it's grown more than we've ever imagined. You know, there was always a belief that was a smaller pocket of very racist people, but unfortunately it's not. And considering the things that, you know, I'll keep it short, you know, coming out of the White House, it makes sense why racist people feel like they have a platform to talk and stuff like that. And I just think that the show, they're watching it, does reflect kind of what we're living in right now, which kind of sucks, but you know.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, I'm waiting for these next 2 months to fly by.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Rick, what's your thoughts?
I found it, like, in other words, like, to me, it's like you always look at the acting and stuff like that, but you're just kind of like that feeling that your daughter, I just, you know, you try to put yourself in this position, like, how would you tell your kid, you know, that had to be like just a shitty thing to just sit there and say to your kid, you know, we'll go through the kitchen. Whereas, you know, that shouldn't, you know, you think that should not be a cautionary thing to tell a 16-year-old kid, you know, like it's embedding a certain thought in their mind, I'm sure.
Right.
And then the conversation, like you said, that it's a racism. I'm not sure if you asked her, you know, if they had a conversation with her, I doubt whether she would ever think that was like Orietta's, that was anything near racism, that, you know, like, it would be like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, for her, that would be a Monday.
Yeah.
You know, when you grow up with stuff like that, it seems normal because you don't know any other way.
Yeah.
But I also thought it was interesting too, that when she finally comes out of the room and she meets up with Chris Rock's character and his boys with her parents, the idea that I love the fact that she was sent back in her room, meaning we saw it from a point of view. Noah Hawley made a point to see it from a child's perspective, how intimidating that could be. Because again, she kept asking, who were those men? Who were those men? Her mom pretty much put her in a place and just like, if we want you to know, we'll let you know. Right. But her dad kind of just said, look, we got money problems. I guess they're there to help. So I'm very curious to see how that progressed, how that what's going to happen in those next episodes.
Yeah. It's interesting indeed. I was going to, funny because I was going to ask you a first impression of Orietta, and I actually, this question was about Orietta, and did Josto, which is the Jason Schwartzman character, was he asking her? Was your impression that, do you think she just assumed that he was asking her, or do you think he was asking her without asking her to take care of her dad?
Murder his father?
Yeah.
Well, okay. First of all, let's before we hit there, I gotta say how much I love the direction of that, because just the look, again, I'm just being a filmmaker nerd. The way this is shot, I mean, whoever is the Fargo's DP is killing it. I love the idea that the Italians and the blacks need each other, you know, because the Jason Schwartzman character is having a fight with his father, saying, why are we working with them? We should be, we should run over them. We should take care of them. And of course, he gets shot, after it looks like he's going to have a heart attack, and lets out one mean fart.
I assume that was comic relief.
It better be,
because it was world class. Because it was a great build up to that.
But how cool was it though? Just when you look at that scene and the tension of what was going on, and at the time the car stopped because of the light, and you see two black gentlemen walking across the street. It looks like it was going to be a setup, and then you cut with two kids playing, cowboys with guns and stuff like that, and it just kept cutting back and forth. And after the flatulent, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, and then he gets shot by what I'm assuming is a child's BB gun, which they got to rush to the hospital. So obviously he's not able to get into the white hospital. He's got to go to the public hospital. And yes, I do think, going back to find out that the nutty nurse works there, and then she shared, Jason Schwartzman, they shared drugs together. They do coke. I do believe he was asking her to kill his dad, because I was watching it again, and the moment, I could see the thought hit him as he all of a sudden puts on an act about his father suffering, and and what's funny is she makes a comment. She says, "Well, I'll be there until the good Lord comes for him," something like that, But yet you knew she got it. So yes, my answer is absolutely, because the scene prior to that lets you know that he's trying to. He's the guy. Maybe he's the guy that, because I was wondering, I said, we are kind of missing that guy that's like the Martin Freeman character, or the Jerry in the movie, the guy that's like wants to do the shortcut, he feels it's his turn, and he's not, nobody's respecting me and I should be running things. And up to that point, I was thinking, I don't see that character anymore. And now I'm thinking, yes, the Jason Schwartzman's character is that guy. He's getting no respect from his old man, and now his old man is in a situation where if he lives, he has all the power. If he dies, he's now the head of the crime family, the Italian family.
Right. I found it interesting too. At first, I wasn't sure. Like yourself, I wound up looking at it again. I looked a couple times. I looked at that scene, and a connection ran in my mind of he was when he was a kid, he was given over to the Irish. He was given over to the Irish
for 3 years.
Yeah, for 3 years. He made sure for 3 fucking years.
He kept me over there.
Because if I say it is so, it is so. He was traded over. He was a kid. That rabbi was traded. Rabbi Milligan was traded over twice. And then the second time he said, "Fuck you," but he betrayed his father.
I really like that scene. That scene.
And then he betrays his father. He has him whack his own father whack. So it really made me think about this fucking idea. These kids do not like this. Stop this fucking thing. These kids are not. It's not working out the way you think it's working out.
And if you're the Irish dad and you did that to the rabbis, shouldn't it cross your mind at some point that maybe you should have people check in the windows? Maybe you should be like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you did it to someone else. It was not inconceivable that it could happen to you.
Yeah.
But, and then for it to happen to his oldest son, because I like when he pushed the, after we saw him being traded the first time around as a kid, then when we go back to them dealing with the Italians, you see who the little boys grew up to be. And then but the Irish guy had the new son, but it's obvious who he liked the most because he pushed his old son back out there again. Yeah. Maybe that was the straw. They were just saying, all right, you're going down, old man. You're going down. Plus, he was the one that made him kill the Jewish kid.
The Jewish kid, yeah.
And see, and I think that's also another issue that's happening with the story is they don't know how your enemy is treating your own flesh and blood.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You don't know that. It's just this idea of we will raise each other's kid to broker a peace that doesn't seem to want to be brokered, because they turn around and still kill everybody else after a certain time.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too that when he shot the Italian kid and he shot his father, it was kind of it was sort of filmed from the same angle.
Yeah.
Same, just
yeah.
like,
yeah.
Actually, he had little hesitation shooting his dad, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that was pretty quick. That was pretty funny.
He didn't need to hear no Goldilocks story.
Well, but it's interesting because I think even the first time when he had to shoot the Italian kid, you really couldn't tell, did he shoot him or did the
Yeah.
Or did the father? You mean? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I just pulled the trigger, while the kid's, hand was out.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I felt like it was the dad that pulled the trigger. But see, the kid's finger is already on the trigger. So even if his dad comes over it and he pulls it for him, he's still culpable. And that, you don't lose that. You know what I'm saying?
And it feels like it was induced rather than...
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's interesting. There was so many layers in that scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, well, let me ask you guys, do you think that the Schwartzman character induced her or tried to trick her to kill his father? Or do you think she's just crazy enough?
You don't know Orietta yet.
That's what I'm saying, because I think she's the weirdness. She's the thing, because look, yeah.
She doesn't live across the street from a nursing home by accident.
Yeah. She lives across the street from the funeral, right?
From a funeral home. Sorry.
Funeral. Yeah.
She doesn't live across the street from a funeral home by accident.
That was a very creepy ending scene right there.
And she was quick to like, as soon as he mentioned going to share, she was like quick to like, it was like love. That's the way they shot it.
Yes.
It was like love or romance. It was like romance.
Yeah.
Like she found her guy. And
even to the point where she put the eye drops right into her eyes. And of course, she's from Minnesota, the only character that's from Minnesota. And I take it that this is probably the same Kansas City mom that is referred to in season 2 in Fargo.
I'm going to go on the limb and say yes.
Okay.
I don't know for sure.
Yeah, right.
Limb. Very tiny limb.
That's a tiny limb. Rick, you kill me, man.
Barely a limb.
Let me guess. You guys have already finished the season, right? You've already finished.
They got one more episode.
I have 2 more. I'll probably watch one tonight.
Yeah.
I'm
not going to say. I'm not going to say anything, Greg. But
no.
Except to say that it's Fargo, and I think you're going to like it.
Well, no, I mean, again, this episode was look, almost all the episodes are written by NOIR Hawley, but this one was also directed by him, and there's just something about his direction that I find just fascinating. It just has a unique way of where to point the camera and how to tell a story, and the idea that he's probably gone far away from Fargo, but at the same time, it still feels very Fargo in the sense that it feels very Coen Brothers, because this is definitely more of a Miller's Crossing, Yeah. If you compare it to the Coen Brothers films and stuff like that, but just the way he moves the camera, I love that shot where Chris Rock and Dr. Senator just they kind of go up the stairs of the bank, and you're cutting between that, and you're also cutting between the mom trying to find a hospital for his dad. And it was funny because it's just a side that you don't see, because you're so used to the mob, especially the Italian mob, being all so controlled, because we've seen nothing but movie that glamorizes the mob and stuff like that. So to see them still trying to find a hospital because they got kicked out of one, it's just something I don't see that often, so it's fresh the way he tells the story.
Yeah. Actually, that's that scene of them going into the bankers, the white bankers. Again, this is around a lot of what we talked about already in terms of like this classism and racism that exists without being said. It is, it's like this is the norm, right? Very interesting. He came up, he had this idea, which is a credit card idea.
Yeah.
And they did their homework.
A black man came up with that.
Black man came up with that.
Then a white man took it and stole it.
Said, no, white people will never go for something like that. And and of course, history.
We know, yeah.
So, but I thought that was interesting, that conversation they had. It was a very short scene, but I thought it was really an interesting scene.
It again, it shows the plight of how rough it is to be Black in America, particularly at a time when everything is against you, and you can come up with a genius idea,
right,
that if that person would have been white, he would have been taken much more seriously. I mean, the banker even laughs at both of them, almost as if like his own sons came up with some cockamamie idea and stuff.
Yeah.
Did he offer him like lollipops or something like that?
Yeah, he did.
So it's that kind of condescending attitude that especially when you're trying to, because the interesting thing about the other ethnic groups was the idea of coming to America was it was the land of opportunity. You could actually make something of yourself.
Right.
But it's very difficult when you're more or less a native here. It's considered a stepchild, so to speak. Whatever you come up with ideas, it's never good enough because you're never good enough.
Right.
And so to see that in that bank, what else would the guy do? The guy would never have gone for that deal, even though it was a good. And I wouldn't be surprised if that banker still steals that idea, because that's usually how it would happen. He's telling them, no, nobody would ever do that. And then one day we'll wake up and go, wait a minute, credit, interest. We could charge interest. Yeah.
Just wait a few episodes.
I say wait a few.
Spoiler!
Okay.
Well, I don't know that's going to happen, but it might,
Okay, Rick.
Just wait a few.
I can't wait to watch the rest of it. No, seriously, like I said, I really liked this episode a lot. I mean, I'm Fargo, man. When they come to their episode ones, of setting things up, there are 4-0, and this is another one they knock out of the park.
Well, I this isn't really a spoiler, but the episode that came out last week is I think going to be a classic.
I
I haven't seen this week's episode yet, but the one that's last week is kind of a classic.
Episode 9, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Me and Jack, I think between the both of us, both agreed we think it's the best episode of the season.
And that's episode what? 5?
9.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they did 10, right?
11.
There's one more
11.
to go. Yeah.
11. I only have 2 hands, so. I tried with one. I tried to do 11 with one.
Or I could be like the Kitchen Brothers, I could do.
Yeah.
So do all the episodes, are they 10 or 11, or is this the first one that's 11? Because are the other episodes are 10?
First season that's 11.
Yeah, this first one that's 11. Yeah.
Okay.
So.
But no, I'm all in. I can't wait. And that's another thing too. They find ways to get you hooked, because again, even the scene where the nurse comes in and she before she kills the Don, he wakes up and she speaks Italian fluently, which all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, what really is her story? And she was telling me all the different languages that she speaks. And she kills him right in front of a bodyguard that's asleep, which he should be fired. I mean, my God, man, come on.
She's pretty good at her fucking thing, though, man. The way she does it.
She's great.
She handles it. She talks to him like, don't worry, my darling. Until he's reaching, stop it.
Well, that's the reason why I'm saying to myself, it wasn't that hard to push her to do that, which is starting to make you think, would she have just done it anyway? Because she definitely has a. Okay. All right, Jack. You make me want to just get off this and start watching the rest of these episodes, okay? Oh my God. Let's just end this. I think we're done talking.
I'm telling you.
Don't listen to Jack. Jack's just stirring the pot to see if he's in trouble.
Make sure she lives across the street from a funeral home.
Yeah. Yes.
Just
with her creepy self.
It was the rent that made her move in there. Come on now. So,
how much rent was back there? What was it?
I don't know, pretty.
To rent a room would be what, $20 or something like that?
Yeah.
Something like that. That's not bad, huh?
And that's probably for the month or a week or something, you know?
Yeah.
The price of living, I tell you.
Well, did you recognize Chicago in the filming of it?
You know, honestly, I didn't. That's so great. That might be the first time until you mentioned it. Yeah. I didn't even notice. I didn't. Well, because they did not. I did like the letterhead that they used for Fargo, because that was incredible. They had Fargo. They went big, and you saw the city. But for some reason, I just assumed. I thought the story took place in New York. So when I saw the city, I just assumed it was New York. No, I did not recognize that was. How embarrassing. My hometown didn't even know. They used it well.
Yeah. Well, the whole season's filmed in Chicago, so.
Okay. Another reason to watch all this. Well, see, this, again, a lot. I mean, it's funny. Shows, I'll say this. For the last couple of years, shows that's dealing with telling Black experience and stories. So far, 3 shows that has done that so far is Watchmen, Lovecraft Country, and now this. And these are shows that are really pushing the envelope and really telling some very specific stories that I don't know if you would have gotten these type of stories maybe 20 years ago, especially on television, on streaming and stuff. So I'm really happy with the amount of storytelling on different, people of color and ethnic groups and stuff like that. So
there's also a lot in the second season of Umbrella Academy.
Gotta watch that. I gotta watch that. So many people have told me to watch that. I'm going to start watching that.
I know there's like so many shows to watch, and I can't find. I want to see. I just saw pieces of The Watchmen the other day, and I just like.
Yeah.